I'll be teaching psychology this week on Celebrity Substitute.
Did you ever wonder why we live in fear of that little ding on our email? We're going to find out why that gives us so much anxiety. My name is Christina Costa. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I teach psychology. And today we're going to be learning about classical and operant conditioning. Joining me to help teach today's lesson is our celebrity substitute, Camila Mendez.
Hi, Christina. How are you?
I am super excited to teach this next lesson.
Me too. I really like this one today. I had a lot of fun shooting our last lesson, though. That was really fun. I think Truffle and Buggy had like a really special connection. You know, they met online, and now they might like go get coffee soon and get to know each other.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I felt the vibes. Should we get started on today's lesson?
Let's do it.
Our last lesson, which you can check out anytime here on YouTube, we focused on motivation and we touched on how different kinds of rewards influence human behavior. In order to understand how rewards and punishment shape long-term changes in behavior, we need to understand the learning process. Today, we're going to explore two fundamental methods of learning that shape the way we interact with the world. So I'm taking over your lesson on classical and operant conditioning. First up, let's talk about two essential pieces of the learning process: the stimulus and the response. A stimulus is, well, it can be... I knew it. Give me 1 second. A stimulus is, well, it can be almost anything. It's part of our environment: an object, an event, a sensation, anything that causes a behavioral change or a response. Like, you know how sometimes your favorite song comes on and before you even know what's happening, you realize you're dancing? Well, the stimulus is the song and your dancing is the response. This framework is essential to understanding two of the most fundamental learning processes: classical conditioning and operant conditioning.
We'll start with classical conditioning, which was first studied in depth by someone you've probably heard of, Ivan Pavlov. Before he made waves in the field of psychology, he was actually a physiologist, and fittingly, his biggest discovery had to do with the physiological response.
You're probably familiar with Pavlov's famous experiment. He started with a dog and meat tenderizer powder, which is a well-known canine delicacy. When the meat powder was presented, it caused the dog to salivate. Because this happens on its own without any intervention from Pavlov, we call the meat powder the unconditioned stimulus, and the salivation the unconditioned response. But here's where the experiment starts. Pavlov then added a noise, like a metronome, when he presented the dog with the meat powder. Sadly, there's no metronome emoji, so we'll just say it was a bell. His theory was that the dog would associate the noise, the neutral or conditioned stimulus, with the meat powder. Pavlov thought the association would be strong enough that even if you removed the meat powder, he could use the sound to prompt a salivary response. And he was right. Even with the unconditioned stimulus gone, the bell sound made the dog salivate, what we call a conditioned response. This, in a nutshell, is classical conditioning. We see classical conditioning playing out in our lives all the time. For example, taste aversion. If you got a nasty case of food poisoning from a tuna sandwich, you might not even be able to look at one without getting nauseous, even if you loved tuna before. In this case, the sight or smell of the sandwich is the conditioned stimulus, and your nausea is the conditioned response. It's hard to unlearn the trauma that comes with a bad fish sandwich.
Camila, you know what that means.
Free period, baby. We get to do whatever we want. I have so many questions about what high schoolers are like in class these days.
Oh my gosh. It's a lot.
And we're back. We just covered classical conditioning, which is all about involuntary reflexes and reacting to environmental stimuli. Operant conditioning is a little different. It's all about learning the consequences of your behavior. So let's meet the father of operant conditioning, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner. Such a crazy name. Unlike Pavlov, Skinner didn't use dogs in his famous experiment. He turned to different four-legged creatures. Rats. Here's how Skinner's experiment worked. The rat was put into a box, which I know we can all relate to right now. Inside this box was a lever. Whenever the rat hit the lever, a piece of food dropped right in front of him. And eventually, the rat learned to seek out the lever. It associated the lever with food and changed its behavior to obtain that reward.
This type of behavior modification is known as positive reinforcement. Reinforcement because it's encouraging an increase in that behavior, and positive because a stimulus was added. In this case, the stimulus is the food.
We experience positive reinforcement in the real world all the time. Let's say you're driving. You get to a four-way stop at the same time as another car. You're being a model driver, so you come to a full stop and you let the other car go first. And the other driver gives you a little smile, a little wave that just brightens your day. They added a pleasant stimulus that will encourage you to keep being a good driver.
Positive reinforcement is actually one of 4 behavior modification techniques that fall under the umbrella of operant conditioning. We're going to explain the other 3 right now.
So you're back on the wheel, but this time you're being a little more careless, all right? You're adjusting the radio, you're fishing under the seat for a quarter you dropped under there, and suddenly you hear honk. That honk is meant to discourage a behavior, which is your bad driving. And this is an example of positive punishment. I mean, that sounds like an oxymoron, but remember, the positive just means a stimulus. The honk was added to the environment. What about negative reinforcement? Let's say you normally hit a ton of traffic on your commute to school or work, but one day you leave the house earlier than usual. Guess what? The roads are clear. So you start leaving earlier every day to avoid the traffic. I can't relate because I don't ever leave early for anything. This is negative reinforcement because the removal of morning gridlock encouraged you to leave for work early. Let's take a look at our last example, negative punishment. You're out on that open road, but you commit a cardinal sin. You start texting while driving. You get pulled over and you get a ticket. This is negative punishment because a rewarding stimulus, your money, is being removed. This is meant to discourage a behavior, which is playing on your phone while you're driving. And speaking of your phone, it's basically ground zero for operant conditioning. When your social media post gets a lot of likes, that's positive reinforcement. And when you check to see if your friends have texted you, you're removing the anxiety of missing out on something fun. That's negative reinforcement.
Well, that explains why so many of us are addicted to our phones. But let's get back to that question I asked at the beginning of the lesson. Why do we live in fear of that ding sound from our emails?
It's classical conditioning. It's not the ding that's scary. It's what the ding represents. Emails to respond to, busy work, assignments that might drain our time and energy. In other words, we've been conditioned to fear that notification sound. Even when we get an email that has nothing to do with busy work, we still experience that unconditioned response of stress. And to be honest, it's not fun to have a little ding sound running our lives, Sorry, I have to check this. Tell Tarantino I don't work with Brad Pitt. If you enjoyed this lesson, there's a lot more where that came from. Hit the subscribe button now to make sure you don't miss a moment of Celebrity Substitute. Only on YouTube.